Welcome to the Sports Card Lessons Podcast. I'm your host, Big Ken. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on a streaming service, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. You'll be notified whenever I drop any new content. Welcome, and thanks for being here. I hope everyone is doing well. This is overall episode 125, but episode 25 of season 3. We're halfway through season 3 already. Doesn't seem possible. First week of the NFL is over. Did not disappoint. Great games, crazy injuries, overtime on Monday night. Rodgers out for the season after 4 plays. And everyone, including me, pulling out our Zach Wilson cards and dusting them off, hoping for the best, hoping for some kind of miracle that these cards gain value. The Dallas Giants game that I thought was going to be probably one of the better games of the weekend was probably, to me, the only disappointing game all weekend. I guess if you're a Dallas fan, you were super excited, but it was easy to turn that game off early and go, watch something else. But anyways, let's get into today's episode. So after last episode, a lot of feedback. The episode starting to see some card show fatigue, just a ton of feedback. And one thing I just wanted to throw out there, because a lot of people seem to ask me this, and I guess I really wasn't clear. A lot of people asked about the foot traffic last week, a ton of foot traffic at that show last week. And in fact, all the shows I go to, I even talk about going to these local shows that, there were times when I used to go to some of the local shows, there wasn't, many people in the parking lot. Every time I go to these shows now, I struggle to find a place to park. The foot traffic at any show has not been the problem at all. Probably, over this past year, I think shows have been really well attended. So definitely last weekend there was just a ton of foot traffic. But I did get a lot of other feedback, agreeing, disagreeing, and just some other thoughts on what people thought, is going on. So today I just thought I would talk about the comments. I was overwhelmed with comments, and I thought this would just make a great episode just to talk about these things. I'm going to talk about some of the comments, and I want to focus just a little later on a handful of listeners who reached out with some feedback, and they all pretty much had the same thing to say. It was interesting, and it's something I want to share with you guys towards the end of this. And it all kind of tie in to today's episode, but last week's episode as well. So really today's episode is based on some listener feedback. As for starting to see some card show fatigue, the feedback was mostly agreeing, right? A lot of people saying for local and smaller shows, maybe there's too many of them. But they felt that there just wasn't, at these smaller shows, there just wasn't a lot of money being spent. People were saying, "Oh, you can't bring, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 cars to these local shows," which I kind of disagreed a little bit. But I had a lot of people, reaching out saying that. People were saying they're seeing, the local shows, they're seeing the same dealers with the same inventory who set up at the local shows or any of these smaller medium shows. And I'll just give you, for instance, we have, local shows here in Connecticut, and they run every month, and I see the same dealers at both of those shows, even though they're on either sides of the state or, pretty far away from each other. The dealers are still going to set up there, and I know what they have in their cases. And a lot of times they probably, they may still have the same stuff in their case. So it's you have certain people that have the same stuff in their case a lot, and then you have other people, and we all kind of know who those people are, who are always turning over their inventory, right? They usually don't have the same cards, maybe same type of cards, right? But not the same cards. Um, and these are the guys that, even myself, when you see them, you're like, oh, cool. I want to go see what they have because they always have something kind of cool or unique or better, and usually just a really good selection. Um, from walking and setting up at so many shows, I probably know all the dealers, right? And some of them I will go talk to, and I've never really bought anything from them, just maybe because they're not selling stuff that I want, right? Number 1 or number 2, some of the guys being dealers that I go to these shows, that if I'm just gonna buy something to go sell to somebody else, sometimes it doesn't make sense, the prices, and sometimes I feel, especially when I know people and people get to know me, I know some really pretty good friends with people, and unless somebody really wants to sell me something, it's tough for me to go in and say, "Oh, hey, the last comp on this card was 100. Can I get it for 60 so I can go sell it for 80?" For all that, I'd rather just have a great conversation with you and move on, than trying to do all that because in some sort of sense, I don't feel right doing that, right? So when I go to these local shows, a lot of times I'm looking more for maybe some stuff for myself or maybe to sell some of my cards, right? And talking about the guys that have the same inventory all the time in their case, you know, I'm guilty of that. I've been that guy many times. I mean, I know I've been at shows, right? And I'll see somebody come up and I'll think, you look kind of looks familiar. And they'll start looking at my case, and all of a sudden they'll stop and they'll look right up at me and they'll be like, "Hey, you were at like so and so show, right?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh yeah, I remember your cards." And immediately I'm like, "Man, that's not a good look, not for me." I want to be the guy that people are going to saying, "Oh, this guy's always got new stuff." But it's hard. I mean, it's not easy to continue um to turn a lot of inventory unless you're very active on social media, you're very active at the shows, and you're buying well and selling well. I mean, I haven't hit that level yet. I'd like to get to that level, but I just haven't hit that level yet. Uh It seemed to be the consensus that more recently people aren't buying bigger cards at smaller shows, but buying smaller cards or digging through single boxes at smaller shows. And the bigger cards and the bigger deals are happening at bigger shows. Um, and a lot of people, you know, are talking about, all the money's at the bigger shows. The money's at Dallas. It's in Anaheim. That's where all the cash is. A dealer even said to me last week, when they say he said this guy was right next to me. He said, "Yeah, it just feels like kind of a strange show." He goes, "I really have a feeling all the money's in Dallas this weekend, because I know there's a handful or more of dealers that are usually set up at that show that weren't there that I know were in Dallas that weekend." And I know people are going to disagree. We're going to have disagreements to these statements. I understand that. And I'm with you, but only so far. I mean, I've been at smaller shows. I've witnessed 30K cash deals at smaller shows. I've seen these deals happen. I've seen 5, 8, 10,000, 15. I've seen people counting this money out at these smaller shows, but I haven't seen it recently. I haven't seen it lately at the smaller shows. I haven't spent a lot of time at the smaller shows either. I usually go for a couple hours. I walk the shows. I talk to people. I set up at you know, how do you describe it, right? A smaller show to a mid show, right? So the smaller shows are what, 60, 65, 70 tables, to maybe 100 or 110 tables. Usually that's where I'm in the 100 and up on the tables, 100, 150, 200, 250. That's kind of where, my sweet spot in setting up there. But I haven't in the shows that I've been setting up at, and And the smaller shows, I haven't really seen like really big deals. The last big deals I've seen, the big cash deals I've seen going down were at the National back in July. I watched a lot of big cash deals go down there. I haven't really seen any big cash deals at shows that I could really report about. Um, I also heard that, like last weekend, if there's shows going on, and I don't care where you are in the country, I mean, I'm talking about here, in the Northeast, but anywhere, that because people are reaching out to me from all over the US, right? Leaving comments. And the consensus is, if there is a big show like a Dallas show or the Anaheim show, there's one of those shows going on that weekend, the smaller shows are going to be slow. They're going to be not as travel, not as much foot traffic, uh maybe not a lot of higher end cards being moved. For the people who are there are the local collectors and the local flippers, versus the mid to high end collectors and flippers are traveling to these big shows. This is where they're making money. This is where they're spending money. This is where their bigger opportunities are. And it kind of used to be, and I used to talk, like a lot of people I talk to when I jump back in, and they would say, "Oh, there's these small shows, all over. You go out to Pennsylvania and these remote locations to these small shows. This is where you're going to go get these great deals, and then you can bring these cards back and then move them, set that, when you set them up, you're getting them in a good deal, and then you can come sell them in a good deal." And I've traveled to some of these smaller shows, and I really haven't gotten great deals. It's not something like it was a cash cow that I went there and I was like, "Oh my God, I got to hit this show. Next time the show is open, I've got to go there." And I think I've listened to a lot of dealers talk about this and talk about doing these shows. And I've reached out to a few and say, "Hey, do you still go to this show or that show?" And they're like, "No, last time I was there, it really wasn't that good." So I think kind of the industry, the market may have caught up a little bit too. That those deals, you're traveling a lot, but are you really getting, some of those good deals? So again, the smaller shows, maybe just smaller sales, not saying less sales, maybe just smaller sales, not as big now. Um, and all of these are really valid points with arguments, arguments on both sides of that. Um, but a few listeners reached out, and this is what I was talking about earlier. And I had about 4 or 5 people reach out and talk about this, and it was really kind of the same thing. And I was like, wow, this is something I really need to share. I need to bring this out, and put this out on the podcast. But they reached out and said the advantage at these shows used to be on the dealer side of the table, buying and selling. But recently, that's changed. They feel the collector and flipper on the attendee side of the table now have the advantage of buying and selling. Um, One person said, "Hey, I get to the show early. I just try to take advantage of a nervous dealer who needs to recoup their money, for the cost of the day, the table, the traveling, maybe a hotel and all that, or, whatever the expenses are, and just tries to find a bigger card, that a dealer may have more room on or be more apt to sell at a bigger discount because it's a big sale." And as a dealer, I know I'd love to have a big sale first thing in the morning. There is nothing better at a show than for somebody to come up and make a big sale, or you make a big sale first thing in the morning, because the rest of the day you're just sitting back, you're relaxed, and things are just, going smooth. It kind of sets the tone for the day. Um, I had another person said, he walks the room. He'll just doesn't matter what time he shows up, and sometimes it may be later in the day, but he just walks the room and just looks at the dealers. He looks at what they look like. If they're looking defeated, just slumped down in their chair, looking defeated, he says to himself, "Here, I know I can make a deal here. I know I can get something done. I can get a deep discount on something. I can just tell by the look on this guy's face that he needs to make a sale, and I'm just gonna try to move in and take advantage of that. Another guy said to me, "Hey, you know what? I go from table to table and I offer well under I select cards out of everybody's case, anything I'm interested in buying, and I'm gonna offer well under comps." And most of the time they'll be like, "No, this I really need to be here." And sometimes people are like, "Okay, I'll make the sale." But he said the key to what he does is he goes back a second time, makes mental notes. He goes back a second time. He goes back to every single case and he reminds the dealer of his offer. And he said there's a good amount of time, an hour later, an hour and a half later, the later it gets back in the day, and I come back around and I'm offering again on the same card, I'm giving them a second chance. And I understood when he said that I'm giving them a second chance because there have been times I've been at a show and somebody'd come up and we'd negotiate back and forth. And I'm just going to make up some figures. I got a card for 500 and they'll say, will you take 420 for it? I'll be like, nah, I really need to get 450 for it. And they'll be like 425. And I'll be like, no, I'm really, I need to be closer to 450. And they may even come up a little more and say 430. And at that point, I've felt like, I've made a stand twice. I should just stick to it because maybe they'll come up. And they'll be like, okay, I'll think about it. And they'll walk off. And I'll start to think, and I'm like, you know, I I lost that sale for $20. Was it worth losing that sale for $20? And I think to myself, if I had an opportunity again, if that person was standing in front of me again, would I say, yeah, I can do it for 430, right? So genius what this guy's doing because he understands how we're thinking as a dealer, and he's coming around a second time saying, I know you really were at 450, but can you do 430 for it? Like, I could do cash. We can get this deal done right now. I bet you 6 or 7 out of 10 times, if someone did that to me and it was a small amount, $20, $25, 15, 10, something like that, I would probably say, "Yeah, I can do that." Throw my hand out, shake your hand, "Let's get this deal done." Something like that. So genius. And as I'm reading this, I'm like, these are all little things that I understand from being on the dealer side of the table, right? But now I'm understanding how the attendee is thinking, how they're thinking, what they're thinking, looking at me and coming up and negotiating on this, on a card. Um, so it got me thinking as I read this, has the advantage moved from the dealer to the attendee? I mean, has this happened? You know, eh, I talk about everyone coming to the table, they wanna buy under comps. Everybody wants to buy under comps. And if I can't buy a card well under comps and be able to sell it under comps, how could I continue as a dealer? And I understand that. And I faced this like a year ago. I faced this and I knew this. And I said, look, if when the market a year ago, a little over a year ago, but maybe a year ago, I think it was August, September when that market dipped. When I really had to take a long, hard look at what I was doing and being a dealer and setting up, I knew if I couldn't figure out a way to buy cards and be able to sell them under comps and still make money, then my dealer days were numbered because I couldn't keep going to shows uh, because it's an expense. I mean, the table's an expense, the travel's an expense, everything's an expense. And if I'm breaking even on cards or only making a few dollars on cards, it really wouldn't be worth it. It'd be better for me just to go show up as an attendee and walk around than do what other people do, try to sell on Facebook or buy these cards and send them off to, consignment or whatever else. So I had to figure out a way to be able to buy the cards, sell the cards, buy the cards well, sell them under comps, but still make money, make it worth my while doing this. And I don't know. I mean, I know there are a lot of people who do this, right? But I think there's more people that don't do this. Like, I think there's a lot of people that they love the hobby more than they're good at the business part of it. Um, because, I'll walk up to a table and I'll see a card. For instance, I'll see a card, a Joe Burrow card, and I'll be like, "Oh, that's a nice card," right? I'll pull up my phone, take a picture of it, I'll look it up, and I'll see the last sale, and I'll say, "Oh, here was the last sale right here. This card sold for $650 on eBay." And then I open it up, I zoom in on the PSA label, and I realize that card sitting right here in the case is this person bought it at the 600 or $650, but they're selling it for $750. And then I say, well, the last comp on it was 750. Yeah, but they have a story, but there's no but. I mean, it's the identical card. This is the card. I've got so I think to myself, how good are they at doing, is somebody going to walk up to this table and they're going to convince somebody to buy this card, for over $50 over, $75 over? And if they are, I need to stay here and figure out how they're doing that, because I don't know many people who are going to walk up, especially on a card that has a very high pop count, and it's the last sale is right here, and you were the last sale, right? So I'm not convinced that people are that as good at being a dealer as others are. And I know some are brilliant at doing this and are buying in bulk, and they've got people lined up to sell them their cards. And these are the people that are so successful in this market. But there's not that's not the majority, right? That is not the majority. There's people like me are out there and just grinding, every day, every week, figuring out how to make this all profitable and keep it enjoyable at the same time. Uh, I've completely like, and I want to say that there are shows that I go to that I completely have relied on my singles boxes. I mean, thankfully, and I don't know, I must have been maybe in season one. I think it had to have been in season one where I said to myself, I said on the podcast, I said, you know what? I'm watching these guys with a single case, these high dollar cards. All they need to do is sell one card, pays for the whole day. I mean, everything is done for them. And there was no real, get ready for a show. These people were like, oh, yeah, I was out doing this, and that last night. Yeah, I got up this morning. I grabbed my cards. I grabbed my case, and I showed up. Oh, put my case down, put my cards in, and I'm ready to go. Where I was home pricing things. I had these boxes and these cards and penny sleeving and top loading and putting all this work in. I'm like, oh, that's way too much work. I want to be more like them. Right. And then people said, no, you don't want to do that. And the singles boxes, that's where you make your money for the day. That's, people really were like, man, that's not a good idea to give that up. And I kind of gave it up. And then I realized I went to one show and didn't sell many cards, and thought to myself, wow, I really missed those boxes. So I built more singles boxes, and I started showing back up the shows with them. And I started realizing they were paying for my day. Right. And then everything else, all the profit I could make on everything else was, over and beyond. And there are shows now that I go to that I've relied on my singles boxes to pay for, my table and my lunch, and fill my tank up with gas, right? Um, so I'm thankful to have that. And people will, I think today, because the grading is so cheap, I think that's become one of the biggest things, especially last week when I was at the show. More people digging in singles boxes than I probably have seen in a long time. Probably since I remember at National, the National, that people were really going. There was people just set up tables full of singles boxes, and people were just going through. So yeah, those, it's easy to acquire those singles. Um, Most people, if you're like me, it was from a lot of those singles just came from opening up boxes or being part of breaks and things like that. But now that I'm really not opening boxes, I'm really not getting into breaks. Now it's a little bit harder to get the singles. And then a lot of the singles that I've been purchasing, I've been doing it mostly online, and it was more about hopefully to grade these than to sell them as singles. So getting off on a tangent there. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that if I'm selling at a show, I don't have to take a hit on a card to pay for my day. I don't have to be that defeated dealer that says, "Yeah, just I'm gonna make the sale because I need to put some money in my pocket for the day." Because my singles are putting that money in my pocket for the day, and they're making me feel like I'm happy to have them and my day is paid for. Now over here, I'm not gonna take a loss on this card because if I sell this card on a deep discount, this person's just gonna go sell that card to somebody else and keep my profit. So I'm not gonna let the card go too deep of a discount. Um, are there too many tables at shows? That's something somebody else said these shows are just growing too big, are getting too big, and you know the too many tables has shifted the advantage from the dealer to the attendee, forcing dealers to compete keep lowering their prices just to make sales, against other deals that are there. And I remember when I first started setting up, the rooms were smaller, the number of tables were smaller, and they were crowded. The rooms were crowded. Uh, and there wasn't a lot of time for negotiation and conversation and people to be taking pictures and really looking up the comps on cards. A lot of times the attendees were just happy to have your attention, right? And the if there was a card in the case that they liked, they'd say, "Hey, I'm interested in that card." I would price all my cards, right? And at that time, every card is priced a little over comps. No matter where you go, if you have a dealer's price, nobody's going to price their cards under comps, right? So the dealers, we price their cards over comps, but back then they were priced a little higher over comps, right? Because you were able to do it and you were able to make that money. Uh, and people were just happy to get a discount. And they get your attention. They'd say, "Hey, can you do this and that?" I'm like, "No, but I can do that." And they'd be like, "All right, great." And they would, if they were interested in the card, they would just buy the card because it was a lot of work getting up at tables because there were so many people in there. Right now, I know the rooms have expanded. The number of tables have doubled, tripled, quadrupled. Right. Um, and everything is so spread out now. The attendees have more time to go up to a table. They can see everything. They're not, you know, shoulder to shoulder with people for the most part. Things are spread out a little more. There's more time to negotiate. There's more buying options on the same cards or similar cards. And it's easy now if you were able to walk a room and see everybody's case and see what everybody has and ask everybody's prices and then go back and know, hey, this guy here with the blue shirt or the red hat or whatever, he was the cheapest guy. So I'll just go back and buy the card off of him. Or even try to get it a little lower if I can. But if not, he's the guy I'm going to go buy the card from. So it's a little bit easier, I think, for the attendee, to negotiate or make a better deal on a card at a show now. I'm curious what you guys think. Is the number of shows growing, the number of tables at these shows, you know, is it not show fatigue? Is it show size? Is it, have all these factors altered the landscape of card shows? And if this is the case, right? If this is the case, will dealers or will the number of dealers or more dealers, will they stop setting up at the shows and just becoming attendees instead? Just buying and selling with minimal expenses, instead of paying for the table, they're just paying $5 or $10 at the door to get in and they have free will to walk around from table to table and try to sell, trade, or are able to buy it at these shows. Are things going to change? Is the landscape of these card shows going to start to change a little bit? I really want to know what you guys think. Please reach out to me. If you're watching on YouTube, leave a comment. If you're listening to the pod, come hit me up. Message me on IG at sportscard_lessons. And if you're not following me, give me a follow. I will follow you back. Really want to know. I'd like to hear what you guys have to think on this because I enjoyed reading and corresponding back and forth with listeners this past week on that one topic. Um, and it's been fun. It's been fun, and it's really, made me start thinking a little more and bringing you guys some stuff, a little extra stuff this week. So, yeah, definitely reach out. Let me know what you think. That's all I have for you today. I will be back Monday. Yeah, Monday with a brand new episode. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. And if you like what you hear, please like, definitely subscribe, and most importantly, tell a friend and spread the word. Until next time, take care of yourselves and everyone around you.